All right, next up we have Sarah Wright. As founder of Utah Clean Energy, Sarah Wright has a proven record of accomplishment in the promotion of renewable energy and energy efficiency within the state of Utah. As executive director, she has fostered diverse partnerships with state agencies, municipal governments, industry, agricultural groups, and community groups to advance clean energy solutions. Sarah brings over 15 years of experience with the Utah industry, where she served as an environmental consultant. Sarah holds a BS in Geology from Bradley University and an MS in Public Health from the University of Utah. Please join me in welcoming Sarah Wright.
So a little bit about Utah Clean Energy. I did found Utah Clean Energy. It was back in 2001. And for those of you, many of you were too young and many maybe were not following energy at that time, but it was the time of the California energy crisis. And California was enrolling blackouts and brownouts. Energy was trading at $1,000 a megawatt hour. And to put that into perspective, we don't really think in megawatt hours, but now it's trading between $20 and $40 a megawatt hour. So sort of our energy market was pretty out of control. And when I looked at how the solutions that we were trying to move forward, it was clear that we were not considering climate change. And so I left my 15 years of experience with industry and decided to found a nonprofit that was really solution-oriented. This is my son. He was 3 at the time. And we were really looking at a future that I didn't want to leave for him or his generation. So that's sort of the creation story of Utah Clean Energy. He's now 19, attending a sister land grant school in Colorado, and we still have a lot of work to do. So this is a graph. We've seen different variations of it today, but it's what keeps me up. It's what keeps me up at night, and also what gets me up every single morning. And it shows sort of the different trajectories. If you look at the, I wonder if I have a pointer on this. If you look at the red graph, that's sort of the business as usual. That's where we're headed if we don't make dramatic changes going forward. The blue, I mean, if we could get there, that would be ideal. That's with significant reductions in CO2. The other thing that is really, I'm excited to be here today because it's not just, and I'm just learning more because I'm such an energy geek, but I'm just learning more about what land management and how agriculture and these other sort of land-based control and mitigation and sequestration of carbon can really mean. And so I'm learning a lot from all of you. But it really creates two different futures. One, where the poles are over 20 degrees, where the North Pole is over 20 degrees Fahrenheit warmer. It's really a future that we can't leave for you and the next generation. So we need to act, and we need to act swiftly. And so today I'm going to talk about just a few things. I'm going to talk a little bit. Our organization focuses on energy efficiency in the built environment, the electric sector, and the electric vehicles. And I want to talk about how things are changing really dramatically and why we really can have hope right now. I've been doing this since 2001, and I'm starting to see some really dramatic and exciting changes. I think this is really, for energy, it's one of the most exciting times. Still a lot of inertia to break through, but efficiency is a really big deal. Renewable energy, it's cost effective right now. It competes with fossil resources and storage and other technologies. We are ready for, if we could let it happen and have the right policies and programs, an energy revolution. So this, you've seen this image likely. It's North America at night, and just kind of imagine back over 100 years ago. It was completely dark. And what we wanted our electric utilities, emerging electric utilities, to do at that time was to build an infrastructure, to invest a lot of capital, to build power plants, to build transmission, and to electrify our country. And so we set up a framework where we reward them for capital investments. They earn 15% before taxes rate of return on their prudent capital investments, 10% after, and they collect that through rates. So just sort of keep that in your mind, because that's some of the inertia to moving forward, because we have structured their financial well-being on selling electricity and on building infrastructure. So there are some things that need to change there. So this is sort of these are the greenhouse gas emissions by sector. You can see we focus a lot, our organization and other organizations, on the electrical sector. It's about 30.5% of the emissions. Transportation, where we go into transportation is electrifying transportation, because as we clean our electricity supply, we can then transition to more electrified transportation. And so that's sort of the sweet spot of where we're working. But as I mentioned, there's so many other things that we can do to mitigate greenhouse gas emissions, and I'm honored to be here with you. So as long as I'm talking a little bit about electric vehicles, I wanted to give a shameless plug for a program that we're honored to work on with Utah State and Weber State. We've helped them negotiate discounts on electric vehicles. There's a workshop tomorrow night at the Logan City Hall. The discounts range between $6,000 to over $8,000 discount on different varieties of Nissan Leaf. There's a BMW, there's an Audi, and then there's a $7,500 tax credit, federal, $1,500 state tax credit that we hope to extend, but it's good for this year. And it's really trying to jumpstart this market. So really thrilled that Utah State is such a leader. And if you go to the website, you can actually, the pricing is all published, so you can see how much you would have to pay for these vehicles. And then there's no fuel costs. So, as we look to this conundrum of cleaning up our electricity supply, it's good to know where we are right now. These are 2014 numbers, and they have improved since then, but I didn't have the more current numbers. But nationally, you can see that we're close to 40% coal and close to 30% natural gas, so about 70% of our electricity mix on the national scale is fossil fuel generated, so generating carbon emissions and impacting climate change. In Utah, the story's a little different. We're about 76% coal-fired electricity and 19% natural gas, so about 95% of the electricity, when you flip the switch in your dorm or home business, is generated from fossil fuels. So it's time to do things differently. And what's nice is, I've been saying this since 2001, but the economics right now and the technologies right now make it a lot easier to do things differently. And I'll start with my favorite resource. It's kind of an unsung hero, and it's energy efficiency. You say, well, you can't just change one LED, but if everyone changes LEDs or we redo our buildings. So the Department of Energy shows that 30% of all the energy used in our buildings, commercial buildings, is wasted. It means that they have bad lighting, their systems aren't tuned, old, inefficient heating and cooling systems. This number holds true for our homes, for our industries, huge potential for energy efficiency. So right now I'm going to walk you through the potential for the different resources that we have. Solar, we have no lack of sun. I saw this same map out front. And Utah is one of the 6 or 7 sunniest states in the nation. Really exciting, huge potential to generate a lot of our electricity from the sun. Wind is another huge resource. So when you look at this map, think of purple and purple going to red and then orange are the best wind resources. So you can see the center of the country is our greatest wind resource. In fact, I just read an article today with all the wind that's going in Iowa, that the ratepayers in that state are set to, over a number of years, save $12 billion on their energy costs, because we're locking in prices and the prices have come down so low. When you look at Utah on this map, you can't really see where more pockets of wind power here that can be developed. It's not like the big land masses like in the Midwest, but we do have good resources, and we do have wind that's already been developed here. And the other thing that's changing with not just Utah's wind resource, but this is a good chart that shows what's happening, is that the first two are kind of where we are right now, state of the art in wind development, and the darker blue colors are where you can develop wind. We're moving to taller hub heights on these turbines. We're moving right now 100 Meter hub height is pretty common. We're moving towards developing 140 meter hub height. You can harvest a lot more wind in those areas with tall hub heights. Doesn't mean it doesn't have sort of natural resource animal issues that we need to really look carefully at when we're developing them, but a tremendous potential for wind energy development. And then geothermal, that's just the heat of the earth, being able to convert that to electricity, or even at a shallower level, what they call ground source heat pumps for heating and cooling our homes and buildings. Great potential for that as well. So you can see just on what's available, we have a huge potential for significant renewable energy development. So I'm going to talk a little bit about each resource. This is really the nice thing about efficiency, it also has air quality benefits, and it's not just for new construction, but these are some homes that are being built near Liberty Park in Salt Lake City. They're going to be net zero homes, meaning that they are built super efficient, they have solar on their rooftops, and they generate as much energy as they consume. And we can do this right now, and it's economic right now if you plan and use best practices. So there's a new study out. So my friends at the American Council for an Energy Efficient Economy, they've been around since 1978, since the first energy crisis, but they've published a report, and I really think this is true, that energy efficiency is the greatest energy story you've never heard. And in the electricity sector, when they looked at energy saved from appliance standards, codes for how we build our buildings and homes, and utility investments in energy efficiency, that it's the third largest resource. So listen again, energy efficiency is the third largest resource that we've built to date. It's huge. It's huge. Sorry. I couldn't help it. So I just, as we think about our solutions going forward, the other thing about energy efficiency, it's also the cheapest resource. It's significantly cheaper to build our facilities and retrofit our facilities to save energy than it is to go out and build new power plants. And there's no risks, there's no carbon emissions, so it is really a critical resource that we need to take seriously, and we need our policymakers to take seriously. And so another way to look at this, they looked from 1990 to today, and they showed that through energy efficiency alone, through those three parts of energy efficiency that I just mentioned, we've avoided 313 power plant equivalents. And then just by 2030, and these are just modest improvements. They're not saying that we have to, go crazy. If most of the states across the country start performing like the best performing states, we could avoid 800 power plants by 2030 through energy efficiency. So if you take nothing else home from this, my talk today, really understanding that energy efficiency is a really big deal. So solar, everyone loves solar. People will ask you, they won't ask you to see, did you put R40 in your walls, but they'll be really excited about the solar system on your home, and I'm excited about it too. This is a system that's on the Olympic Oval. This isn't my family, but this is one in my backyard. So you can have, commercial, residential. And this was still under construction, but this was Utah's first utility scale solar project. 105 megawatts. We have a gigawatt that will be coming online before the end of next year. A gigawatt is a lot of solar. It's dispersed in 100 megawatt projects across the state, mostly across the southern part of the state, mostly on private land, and it's putting Utah on the map. We are now ranked number 15 in solar installations. And it's the other thing about this power is Utah Clean Energy won a case in 2013, and it was based on a law that was passed under President Carter, of all things. And he required utilities to buy power if it was the same cost of other fossil fuel power, renewable power if it was the same cost as other fossil power. And so these projects are going in at about, some of them 4 cents a kilowatt hour. You pay on your home bill like 10 or 12, but that includes other things. But 4 cents a kilowatt hour locked in for 20 years. This stuff is economic right now. So huge potential there. This just looks at it looks at the trends for costs. You can see that the costs continue to decline. These costs are actually a little higher than what we're seeing in Utah, but these are national costs, so prices just keep coming down. Last year they came down another 7 or 8%, so we're getting even better at it, and it's getting even cheaper. This is what's happening to, remember I told you we're sort of on this big tipping point and things are starting to change. Back when I started this in 2001, we weren't seeing a lot of action. We wanted to see it, but it was still too expensive. It's cheap, the technologies are advancing, the ability to integrate it into our system because we use electricity in real time is advancing, and you can see how rapidly PV deployment is changing across the country. This is same thing is happening in Utah. It's actually a little steeper curve because it took us a little longer to get going, but we'll have, a gigawatt of solar by the end of next year. And then this is rooftop solar in Utah. That is also growing at about the same pace. And so if we can keep our policies and programs and deal with the utility and keeping them financially whole, solar will play a huge role in our energy future in the West. So a little bit about what's happening in wind. This is the Latigo wind farm in San Juan County. One thing I'll note for you, wildlife biology folks, I guess there was a problem with eagles at this site, so they have someone on site all the time watching for eagles, and they actually shut down the turbines. I'm not sure how they sited it there, but they have a mitigation strategy in place. This is one of the poorest counties in Utah, and so the economic benefits from this wind farm are also critical to their economy. So wind prices haven't been quite so smooth of transition, but you can see from the middle of the chart, 2009, they have fallen dramatically, and they continue to fall. We're sort of in the green is the Rocky Mountain kind of interior west region. Prices haven't come down as rapidly, and a lot of that is just when you looked at the map, you saw the areas that had the richest resource. So wind prices are also economic as compared to fossil fuel prices right now. The big thing, the takeaway for this kind of busy chart is the blue band is where the smart people, Energy Administration, where they predict energy prices are going to be, and you can see we don't really know. But the red band at the bottom is how much wind is going to cost. So this just shows, and this goes out to 2040, that wind is like, a bond in your investment portfolio. It's cheap, it's going to stay cheap. Once you invest the capital, you know what you're paying for energy. Same thing for solar for the next 20 years. So a little bit, those are the main resources. The thing that we need to consider is that we're moving to, is that 5 minutes with questions or 5 minutes total? Okay. So is that we are moving to a new future. How many of you still have a landline? There's more in this room than in other rooms. I just got rid of mine about 6 months ago, but the energy infrastructure is changing really dramatically right now, and the information technology, it's changing as rapidly. The technologies are there, but the infrastructure is not really keeping up, and the regulatory and the policy infrastructure, but we really have everything there to go to a smart energy future. And we're used to this big centralized system where we had big power plants and it all brought it into the load. Now we're able to put it on our homes, our businesses, and our communities. The price of storage, I didn't include a chart for that decline, but it's coming down even faster than the price of solar. So once we're able to have affordable storage in our communities and on the grid, then we will be, it will make it so easy to integrate all these resources, and it's all economic right now. Well, storage is almost economic. And so, right now you can already control your thermostat, when your car charges if you have an electric vehicle, when your appliances run, everything. It's disruptive to this 100-year-old business model, but we have, I think we're smart enough to figure it out, and given the implications and how fast, and Rob laid it out really clearly today, how fast, we have like 20 years to make a lot of these changes. The economics are no longer holding us back. It's now the policy and the regulatory framework and, the will of the people to take us to that next phase. So Takeaway is we can decarbonize our electricity system without breaking the bank. Economics are there. Energy efficiency is really the unsung hero in all of this, and disruptive technologies are really what's going to make it all work, and they're disruptive and they're here today. So I think that's it. So thank you, and now if we have time for a few questions. Do you want to call in people?
Sarah, I want to thank you for some real hopeful and exciting takeaways, and unlike some of the more depressing takeaways we've had today. My question is, does our legislature see the future like you outlined for it here, and is there hope for a real mandatory RFP and not just an aspirational one for Utah soon?
You know, those are really good questions. I'm not sure there is that wide understanding about how economical these are to, these energy resources are. The other thing to also understand is we built our industry and our economy on coal, and so we need to honor and make sure that those communities are taken care of, and helping our policymakers understand that it's not an either or, I think is the big trick. And I think also having our policymakers hear from citizens in a really positive way about how excited they are about this new transition is probably one of the best things that we could do to make it, sort of give them the backstop and the support to make some of these changes that we need to make. Yes?
You showed a couple of graphs where in the last 3 or 4 years, U.S. Solar PV installations exploded in Utah over the last couple of years. Where do you see that explosion of growth going in the next few years? What would make it peter out? What would make it sustain?
So from the perspective of rooftop solar, it's how rates are designed. There's a lot of, if you read the newspaper, you'll hear a lot of utilities are trying to change net metering laws that allow you to put it back to the grid. And there may need to be some changes there to make sure it's fair for everyone, but you can also make changes that stop the industry cold. And so if you see the long-term value, and if you value the ability of private investments in solar to reduce the long-term cost for utility, not to mention all the environmental benefits, you need to do some smart changes in how rates are designed for rooftop solar. So it's happening around the country. It's not just in Utah. With respect to utility scale, I think how our electricity grid, this is kind of wonky, but right now we manage our electricity grid in a way where we're almost doing clipboard deals between the different, there's over 40 different balancing orders areas that they need to balance. So there's efforts to modernize the electricity market, which has already happened in the East, but that in the West. If we're able to do that with storage, the sky's the limit.
So that electricity can be traded over the grid greater distances?
Well, not just greater distances. It already can be traded in greater distances, but in real time. If I have to call up Joe and tell him that I see that I'm going to need more power next hour, and Joe needs to ramp up his gas plant versus using information technology and communication systems, it just makes it much easier if we use the tools that we have that we haven't integrated into our system yet, if that makes sense. Yes?
Can you speak to the status of storage and where that's going, what the impediments might be?
So the thing with storage is that it's still, so there's utility scale storage, and then there's more distributed storage. And there's pumped hydro and compressed air energy storage, but I'll start with distributed storage. Right now, the impediment is that it's still, even though the costs are coming down as quickly as solar, it's still about 5 years behind. So for distributed storage, it's still expensive. And then there's just figuring out which systems work the best, have the longest life, how you take care of the batteries after the fact. But right now it's mainly cost. And it's really cost for the utility side as well. But some utilities in Vermont, for instance, they are realizing that if they pay you a little bit to put storage on your system, and you allow them to draw from your storage during times of high peak demand for the utility because they need to provide it in real time, that provides a value to all ratepayers. So it's also recognizing all the different value streams that storage can bring that will make it economic. But falling prices are probably the biggest. Once we get to the price parity, it will take off.
I'm the chair of the Utah Biomass Resources Group, and Pacific Core recently asked us to look at using torrefied wood to replace coal to 10% to power plants. But I was a little disappointed you didn't mention biomass as an alternative. Could you expound on that?
Sure. I'm not a biomass expert, and that's not one of the resources we really work in very much because it's not super common in Utah. I guess if it depends on how you're managing, where it's coming from, how the land is managed. It can be a net benefit, and it's just I'm not an expert there. So if there's anything you want to add to make the pitch, that would be great.
I think it can be a net benefit, and we have an excess of carbon in our forest from biofuel, and we have an excess of Indian juniper that's really taking over a lot of ground in Utah. So we see a lot of potential.
Great. And they did just pass some legislation that gave them money that may be funding that project to look at different ways to keep their coal plants up and running and reduce the impacts. So thank you for that. Any last question?
Is there a benefit to pushing coal or electric cars right now since mostly electricity comes from coal?
The studies show that there still is a net carbon benefit and also a net, just because the efficiency of these vehicles, and a net air quality benefit. In my mind, it's sort of the chicken and the egg thing. We're going to need both, and our electricity system is, getting cleaner and cleaner, and so our goal is to jumpstart both. And then also electric vehicles eventually will be part of how we integrate high penetrations of renewables. Now it's like, charge at night because that's when we have excess electricity. Once we get more and more solar on the grid, we'll want people to charge during the day and soak up that solar electricity. So that's my opinion. But all right, well, thank you so much.